Okay, Rusty has begun the recording, so this is being live streamed on YouTube so that it's an open meeting. And so, Ms. Wheeler, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I would just like to say welcome to everybody. We appreciate you joining us with this amazing technology. I was just saying, I don't understand this, but I'm grateful for it. And I would just like to say also that I'm very grateful to everyone for what you're doing for our students in this challenging time. And I know this has got to be tough for everybody involved, including our parents and our students, but we're proud of you all and appreciate all the hard work and your dedication to this. So I'm going to turn this over to our superintendent, Dr. Howard, for her comments at this time.
All right, very good, Ms. Wheeler. Thank you so much. And I want to second Ms. Wheeler's sentiments. I will tell you that we were not caught off by surprise because we have an amazing team that kind of anticipated, but I don't think you are ever completely ready for something like this. And certainly not for the length of time that we had expected. But there is certainly not enough words that I could say to let our board know how our staffs have responded. And so I'm very, very grateful for all of the work that they've done. And they have to be exhausted by now. I know our kids are, and I know our families are, but they've done an amazing job. So we're grateful as well. And we have not stopped meeting face to face, but it's been digitally. We've been in lots of meetings. And what I have shared with you is that we are trying to send community updates, and that is there just for your review. I will not read it to you because you've probably seen it, but I think probably the most pressing topic on everyone's mind is making sure that we honor our students and honor our graduating class of 2020. We had a lengthy meeting today with our principals as well as especially our high school principals. And our commitment is to make sure that we have a high school graduation ceremony, just like we would have if this had not happened. Our plan is to leave it scheduled for the date that it's presently scheduled and monitor, but we're going to go ahead tomorrow and identify 3 backup dates. So we'll do one in mid-June and late June and then mid-July, so that depending on how this unfortunate situation unfolds, we will have 3 different dates in the summertime. We'll do the earliest one we possibly can, but at least that will give families 3 dates that they can kind of pinpoint that if they decide to try to do some travel or things lighten up, they'll know those are reserved dates for graduation. So high school principals are going to work on that and confirm it tomorrow so that we can advertise. And of course, we're going to continue to do everything in our power to at the next board meeting that we'll have to have digitally in May, since our facilities are closed. We will highlight our kids. We'll make sure we won't be able to have them with us. But we will definitely make sure that you know who some of our young authors winners were and things like that. So many of the things that we would normally do, we're going to try to maintain as much normalcy as possible and recognize our retirees, because we would have been having our retirement reception as well.
Oh, that's right.
We're going to try to hold as many of those things from afar as possible and honor these folks. So you've got the update there for your review, and I am just eternally grateful for the team that I'm blessed to work with, because they have been amazing. So I'm going to let Mr. Nicholson, and I'll bring it up, but he's going to speak just a little bit to what our kids are actually doing, and some of you know firsthand.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. What Dr. Howard has pulled up there is the digital learning handbook that we started creating about a year ago. And it was specifically at that time to inclement weather that was mostly due to winter weather. But as you know, we also had some hurricane closures. And so we revised that prior to our departure from March 13th date. And this is the guidance that we've shared out with all of our schools. The initial effort was that we wanted to make sure that we were able to mirror day-to-day instruction as much as possible. We know that our parents in this situation were still going to have to work, and we knew our teachers were still going to be working, and we were trying to find that balance where teachers were directly communicating with students throughout the day so that parents could get the work done that they needed to do if they were able to telecommute or telework. And so that's mostly for your review, but just the 2 components that I really wanted to highlight is that every day, whether you're elementary, middle, high school, there's a direct instruction component. We've used Google Meet as our primary tool for that. And then there's the independent work, which you also have anything from Canvas to Google Classroom to some of our software platforms that the board has supported the purchase of over the last several years. Just kind of interesting piece of data. Since March 16th, we've had over 1 million visits to Canvas and Google combined. So the work that we started several years ago to increase the flexibility in the learning and the delivery of instruction has really paid dividends, and I appreciate the board's support over the last several years for those purchases. Just as a kind of a fun fact, there have been more than 3,000 visits to a document that's called the EJCHS Physical Education Digital Learning Doc. And I share that because even in this environment, kids are still going to PE and they're logging in their exercise. And so I think that's pretty fantastic that everything they do is not specifically in front of a screen. So I want to thank the board for their support. I also want to put out an immense thank you for our teachers and our parents and our students for doing everything possible to continue the remarkable experiences that we provide and face. We had a meeting today at 3 p.m. with all of our principals and district leaders, and we have provided them, and I believe, Dr. Howard, there's a link in there to the COVID-19 extended closing guidance. And just want you to know that because we are cognizant of this extended closure, we have provided our principals with guidance, and they have not had the opportunity to share it with their teachers yet. So this is a little bit of a precursor, but we want our teachers to realize that when they were working at a breakneck pace earlier the last 2.5 weeks, we want to build in some flexibility, some breathing time, some time for them to plan and collaborate. And so we've updated the guidance for them that really outlines some things regarding maybe not having to deliver all content area every day in elementary, and taking an approach where you might do math and science on one day and literacy and social studies on another day. And likewise in middle and high school, going ahead and experimenting with the AB schedule that we've shared with you. But the whole intention is that we want to create a sustainable model where students are still engaged, teachers are still providing direct instruction, but it's not so overwhelming, because we've never experienced more than 3 or 4 days of this, and now we're talking about months of it. But again, our teachers, our leaders have been phenomenal. And one thing that I would want to conclude with is that our technology team has been absolutely critical to this. They've issued about 6,000 of the Chromebooks. So again, thank you to the board for supporting the purchase of the Chromebooks for the last 4 years. They've installed access points to all of 10 of our schools so that folks can access the internet outside of the schools, all the way out, many of our schools, all the way out to the furthest point of the parking lots. And they've continued to provide in-person and online technical support. So really, this is a public thank you to our teachers, but also to our board for supporting all the purchases that we made prior that have made this possible. And we realize that these are uncertain times, but do your research. Talk to people outside of Jackson County. Nobody's doing what our teachers are doing. They are truly, truly phenomenal.
I would second that completely, Mr. Nicholson, and thank you so much for that work that you've done and led, and all of the partnerships that have taken place. They've been the cool thing is, you probably recognize this, that all of our teachers really have what they call a virtual classroom. So they provide us a link, and you can drop in. And I've dropped into several classrooms and just said hello, and the kids are there just like you guys are right here, right now, and ask them what they're doing, and you can just tell there's really quality learning going on. And so certainly everybody would rather for them to be able to be back at school, but I think that our district and our teachers especially have made the best of a really unique and challenging situation. So with that being said, unless the board has any additional questions about our response to COVID right now, I did want to revisit, if you would, the calendar for 21-22. If you all remember, our Parent Advisory Committee has asked that we try to keep our calendars 2 years ahead because people make plans. There's going to be probably a whole lot of changes in plans this year just because of obvious reasons. But I've attached there the 21-22, which is year after next calendar. And I'd like to talk through it just a bit with you. We have shared this with principals. We've shared it with the Teacher Advisory Council. We've shared it with all the folks that we normally share it with. And I just wanted to point something out before you and entertain any questions or comments that you might have. Again, our teachers have had this mailed out to them and gotten feedback and community as well. But the next summer, July of 21, you'll notice there are 6 pre-planning days. And one of the concerns that that the board members as well as some of our teachers expressed was that 22nd and 23rd. And we're basically asking on behalf of our teachers in our schools that one summer we have those 2 days be flex days in the summer and professional learning days, because that's the opening of the new high school and Empower simultaneously. And we feel like we know our teachers are going to have to work themselves to death that summer, especially at the high school level, but that gives them, in other words, the 22nd and 23rd may not be direct report days. Those are just pre-planning days that can be used for the elementary and middle for professional learning in the summer. And then the other, the high schools, obviously, they're going to be quite committed to making the transition from this high school to the new high school and then Empower. So wanted to bring clarity to that for you and see if that's something that you all would be willing to support. And if so, then we'll ask that you consider approval of that.
Well, let me ask you, I know you said you had talked with the teachers. So do they feel comfortable with that now, that those would be flex days?
Now that when they first looked at it and said, oh my gosh, we're coming back on July 22nd, they were not comfortable with it. And I respect that. When we clarified that, no, those are actually flex days, you're going to give 2 more days in the summer, but it's going to be in different manners. Elementary is going to be elementary and middle, primarily focused on professional learning, and then middle and 8th grade, and then high school will be focused on opening of the new high school and Empower. So they were very, very, and actually they were extremely grateful that we considered that, because they know that they're going to have to work a lot that summer to make that transition happen, and for us to be willing to basically compensate them for that. We all know that teachers spend a lot of time in their rooms in the summer anyway, but when you're moving buildings like that, the drain on them is really pretty taxing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see the week in February too.
Yes, that was a big request back. We had lots of folks wanting that back. So we were able to make that happen and still get out before, the Memorial Day weekend. This particular year, Memorial Day was a little later, not till the 30th. So that helped us be able to squeeze that back in. So
Sure. Okay.
All right. So thank you for your consideration there. And I think Amanda has just provided the minutes from our March 13th meeting that will be on the agenda for approval. And when we close the work session, we'll roll over into the board meeting in just a minute. So okay. I'll turn it over then to Mr. Gilbert. I don't think Josh joined us this evening, which is perfectly fine. But Mr. Gilbert, do you want to share some of the project updates?
Well, good evening, everyone. This is a first for us, but it's working pretty well. You have the only item right now that we put on for this month is the monthly projects report. So you've got kind of a look into the high school, the East Jackson Middle School, Empower projects that we're all working on. I would let you know that, and some great photos in there, by the way, if you want to get a little closer up to the high school project. But so far, we've had really good participation at the site with our workers and really good attention to proper distancing. Everybody on the site's really sensitive to that and trying to do the best they can. You'll probably find a time or two where people, by nature of the work, tend to congregate a little bit, but I think they're making really good efforts to do the right thing. No tremendous hits on activities from a supply chain perspective or labor at this time. None of us know what the coming weeks hold. We'll just adjust as we can, but right now that project's going along very well. Empower also is still in the design stage. We have a team meeting tomorrow morning just to finalize some discussion about phase 2 of the project that's coming up, and the completion of phase 1 drawings. And then we'll have a bid schedule come out of that shortly. The revised plans for East Jackson Middle came to us this past Monday. Those are being vetted now by our contractor and our construction manager, and we'll go on the street. It's being packaged now, and we'll go out for bids shortly. So we're still staying pretty close to original schedules, and we will be commencing construction this summer. The other project that's very important is the AC projects, air conditioning projects at 3 elementary schools. And those will probably have work beginning this month. And just this break in school will give them a little extra time to accomplish that and hopefully be ready by the time we get back to school later in the summer. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have after the photos as the monthly financial report on the expenditures. We have not had any additional change orders this month. It's exactly the way it was last month, and this just reports the pay applications that weren't on there last time. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know, or if you have ones afterwards, shoot them our way.
Ted, can you fill me in or fill us in on a little bit on the changes to empower the floor changes, the admin staying up front?
Sure.
Did I read that right?
Yeah, it's a great question. We looked very hard at 2 things. What was the best final design for Empower? And second, how do we least disrupt Jackson County High School during this upcoming year? And what we found was that by moving the healthcare science back to the D wing, which is the old gym and cafeteria wing, we would have a chance not only to do a fine healthcare science wing, but also to duplicate it in the space and have 2 labs in that area. By doing that and leaving the admin right where it is, we found several $100,000 in anticipated savings in the job. It allows us to be disruptive for the most part just to the D wing and to the site area around it. And it allows us to do a couple things. One is the media center, as is, will stay in the same location for the next year, as will admin, and vehicle drop-off pickup stays the same. So those are real big impacts on the school. We think really in this case, we got much, much better plan for the long term. The healthcare science and the nurses aid labs, both of those are what we would deem as multi-purpose. They are not so specific that later on, if we believe that with outside partners, we want to do a clinic and kind of change some locations, these will be excellent labs for lots of different purposes. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. So the cafeteria is going to stay as it is now. It's going to stay that way next year then, since you're not moving the media center in?
Absolutely. We'll still do all of the prep work for that in the future, which won't be so much a media center, but a little bit different one for Empower. But yes,
Right.
For next year, our hope is that we'll finish everything we need to do in the cafeteria without those walls for the media center.
Okay. And then inside the gymnasium, special education students use the old gym during the day now. So what's the plan you think for them? Are they going to go over to the new gym?
When we spoke with the administrators at the school, they were realized that would probably be the best use is to go to the new gym.
Okay.
Or make other. They didn't feel like the adjustment with the old gym space would be that difficult because there was a time when they didn't have 2 gyms anyway.
Right.
So they were just going to revert.
Okay.
So I think for PE, for some of the special ed programs for ROTC, we'll make accommodations for that for next year.
So the 700,000, you think that's a savings to this phase or to the overall cost of the project?
Well, it was actually several $100,000, not 700.
Okay. I like 7 better than several.
I bet I do too. But we'll know better once our pricing comes in. But from an early cost estimate standpoint, it will save on this first phase as well as obviously the whole project.
So you'll be doing less this summer than we that day. Lynn and I met with you guys, so there'll be less work this summer. Ultimately, I guess.
Well, and it's actually fairly close to it's really just more compact.
Okay.
We won't finish all of the D wing by the opening of school next year,
Okay.
which will be fine. That'll take place through the year.
Okay.
We'll have to be sensitive to noise and that sort of thing, but we will be ready on the cafeteria kitchen, that portion.
Okay. So one last question.
Sure.
I guess teachers still need to get in the building and get their stuff. Is that right?
We talked actually in our principals meeting this afternoon about coming up with a process for that.
Okay.
Right now, we don't want to do that, but we're going to work out a kind of an appointment schedule. We want to make sure we honor everybody's health concerns.
Yeah.
So the idea would be, yes, teachers need some resources. They need their personal items, and they'll need to pack up for the end of school year. We're working with UGA a bit on how they did that with their dormitories and their students, and just want to make sure we do it with this proper distancing.
And so then, but administration will get to stay right where they are. That's right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
And thank you for asking that, Mr. Clare. See, I want to add one thing. As you know, I serve on the board for Empower, and Ted joined the Empower board meeting on Wednesday morning and shared this plan with them. And one of the I think great benefits of making this change is I believe our partners, Piedmont, Northeast Georgia, would be more interested in investing in the development of a clinic that they were able to design. So that moving that the actual teaching lab back there, that doesn't, we haven't done the work for them then they're more likely, I think, to come in and to invest in still, so that A wing could, for the following year, could still be on the table as being built out as a private clinic. But hopefully we would just get more support from some of our partners because it wouldn't already be done.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I know once all this is lifted and is passed by, I'd like to sit back down and see kind of the latest on the floor plans for the interim and then the final. That was the meeting we had a few weeks back was beneficial. Kind of help us understand what the plan is.
We'll be pleased to do that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Anna, we have continued to have positive. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hollett. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. I just wanted to follow up about the East Jackson Middle School. So March 30th is when you said, when will it's past March 30th? I just saw March 30th on there. Let me pull it back up here.
On March 30th, we received the bid set of documents from the architects and engineers.
Okay.
They had revised everything in accordance with the scope reduction and budget reduction. Is that your question?
Yes. So when will we then see what's available?
What we're the process right now over the next, I'd say this week and next week, is the construction manager packages those, advertises to bid. We'll have it out on the street, so to speak, for the next 3 or 4 weeks. And at that point, we'll know a lot better in terms of numbers. We have had a revised cost estimate that shows that we're meeting, the tentative budgets show we're meeting what the board directed us at that board retreat.
Okay. All right, good. There was someone mentioned something about some kind of training or something that needed to be done, but that I don't think that there's no training or anything that needs to be done for any of that renovation over there, is there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Hollett, I'm very glad you asked that. And the day of our retreat, I called Ms. Johnson and I went and met with their faculty on that Friday planning day so that I could explain to them what we were doing and why we were doing it. And I commend that staff because they recognized and understood our challenge, and they were still grateful for the renovations that we're going to be able to do. So that was That was a great retreat. We haven't had a chance to see you very much since then, but thank you for your time. And I think we made some really good progress. Sometimes those productive struggles help us get better. And that was really a good day. So thank you for asking that. All right. Any more questions before we go on to financial report? Okay, Anna, I'll let you take this. This is good, and I expect general fund will stay pretty good, but I'm a little worried about upcoming SPLOST. We'll take it one day at a time.
Exactly, and we'll take this good month that we had, and hope that the next few months won't be too bad. Maybe all that bread and milk and chicken and ground beef that everybody bought. Oh, and toilet paper. Forgot about that one.
Yeah.
That will help contribute to it. But we were well over 600,000 this month. A little bit of a drop from last month and from this time last year, but nothing significant. And our monthly average is still well above $680,000. And we'll just cross our fingers that the next 2 or 3 months won't be a huge, drastic decrease.
Yeah.
Yes, that will be the hope for sure. And just, did you?
I was just going to say, but at least we've had some really, really good months prior to that will kind of help balance everything out, hopefully.
Absolutely.
And then general fund is looking great, and I expect it to continue that way through the end of the year because we still expect our $2.1 million midterm funds to come in from the state. And there'll be several areas of expenditures that we will not be incurring because of the school system closure. So I expect, like I've said before, for us to end well over $16 million for the end of this year. And as you can see, our expenditures are still running about 1% below where we are at this point in the year. And our ending fund balance is over $23 million, which is $3 million above where we were this time last year. And we're just continuing to see things be stable on the general fund side, and pretty sure we're probably going to need it.
I think you're right.
May I ask Ms. Dodge a question?
Yes.
What happens with any of those expenditures that are not, monies that aren't spent? What happens to that?
It just rolls into the ending fund balance, and we just carry it. We carry that balance forward to start next year.
Okay. I didn't know if it's budgeted monies. I didn't know how that goes back in, if it just rolls back in.
Yeah, it just rolls into fund balance. The only thing that we would have to worry about is if there were grants or something in particular with all the funds didn't get spent,
Yes.
but that's not going to be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. We know and we recognize that our educators are, they don't get to fly with fly high with the high economic conditions, but they're a little bit more insulated. So we're grateful for that. All right, and the last one is the one that we all love to see. You basically spoke to the $23 million
Yes.
fund balance already. So
yes, and again, we're still. We honestly, at this point, we could have a good $500,000 to $1 million savings between utilities, power, and substitutes, and some overtime and additional hours, things like that we're not going to be incurring during this time. That could put us even closer to 17 million by the end of the year. It's just kind of have to see how things go.
Yeah, Mr. Clarsey said fuel, and you've got lots of other transportation costs as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and you mentioned the midterm. Do you know for sure it's going to be 2.5,
Yes.
or do you think it might be more?
No, it's 2.149 is how much our midterm adjustment is.
Okay, great. Okay.
So they passed the midterm. We just don't have a final state budget yet, if I remember right.
We don't have a 2021, nothing final for that one, but they did pass the supplemental, the midterm and supplemental budget. So that they did that before they recessed.
Okay. Is this the appropriate time to ask? How did folks in my industry were a little shocked today, a little staggered by the 10 million jobless claims that came out. Where did we stand from school system wise as it relates to any?
Well, we haven't had to terminate or lay off anybody. The only thing really that's impacted is substitutes, which are employed through ESS technically.
Okay.
And then everybody else is getting and earning their base pay. The only thing that they might not be getting is some additional hours or overtime.
So one of the things that we did, Mr. Clarisy, the Thursday and Friday before this all hit, was sit down and take every category of employee. And if they were not directly instructing students, we assigned them tasks to support. So we can't pay them for doing nothing, nor do we want to, because that would be gratuitous. But we have many things that need to be supported. One of the things that Dr. Blankenship worked on is there's a lot of compliance trainings that folks have to do annually, and they usually do that over the summer, and oftentimes we pay them for that. So we front loaded all of the compliance training that we would be doing this summer, and they're doing that right now, as well as for example, our bus drivers and some of our front office staff are helping to prepare the foods, so that we've reassigned duties and responsibilities so that people are not idle. And I'm sure you're a business owner, and so you are very well aware of the unemployment and the extension of the CARE Act and the 2 weeks of additional leave that folks are granted. So I have a conference call every other day with the regional superintendents, and we're trying to stay very comparable in the way that we're handling personnel issues. And everybody is right now trying very hard to pay people their base pay and reassign their duties, because quite honestly, it's more sound than a layoff and then paying them unemployment and then having to bring them back next year. So that's the way we've approached it, and that's the way it is being handled regionally. If something happens, heaven forbid, that we can't start on time next year, we may have to reevaluate that. But we feel like for this year, we have reassigned folks to duties and responsibilities outside of their field that they, and if they can't perform them, they are taking sick leave. And if they don't have leave, then they're having to take leave without pay. So.
Unless they fall into
one of the 6 categories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Needing to care for somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're able to do that, and everybody's keeping their distance, I guess. So all that's good.
Yep.
Most of the work that they're doing is being done virtually. But those that are preparing the meals and delivering the meals, they're all observing the proper social distancing and protection.
Mm-hmm.
What I read an article the other day about Oglethorpe County and some of our rural areas not having internet and driving Wi-Fi buses out. Have we had to do any of that?
Yes, and Mr. Nicholson, you can speak to that, or there's lots of people here who could. I would like to put this one plug. Joe Hicks with Jackson EMC and the Jackson EMC Foundation reached out to me and asked if they could help. Mike Summer and his team had already started investigating. So we have ordered 3 basically mega, it's called Khajiit, that's the company, but it's basically a mega MiFi that will serve 120 students up to 100 yards. And so we are putting those on buses and going to be deploying those right after spring break. We've also purchased individual MiFis for students who do not have connectivity but are also in very rural areas. So that's really their only option. So that's another example of how people have been reassigned, because we've had our front office support and our technology specialists in the buildings calling every single family to find out, okay, can you get to the school? If you can't get to the school parking lot, can you get to the McDonald's? And so basically drilling down to figure out. We started out with about 200 students out of 8,500 who did not have any kind of connectivity, and we're down what, Todd, between 50 and 75 that we're trying to reach with those various interventions. Am I correct?
Yeah,
there?
I would. You essentially summarized it, but between one thing I would add is that our schools were able to use Title I dollars. So we've purchased 27 MiFis and those 3 smart buses. Based on the information we've collected to date, we're probably between 25 and 100 kids right now that do not have connectivity. That doesn't mean that there aren't more out there, but in terms of, we've done surveys, phone calls, teachers, if they don't hear from students on a daily basis, we've got social workers, we've got all sorts of people that are continuing to reach out to those families. So our commitment is that we will continue to do whatever it takes to make sure that they have connectivity. But compared to where we were 3 weeks ago, we're in a fantastic place. It doesn't mean that everybody's covered, but 6,000 Chromebooks out of 8,600 kids, knowing that a lot of our families have devices already, and a lot of our families have internet, and a lot of our families have a neighbor who has internet. We're in a much better place than we were a couple of weeks ago, for sure.
So we already have at least one bus going out, or how many do we have going out now?
The good news about that, Ms. Wheeler, is that they don't actually even require the buses. The Khajiit, the smart bus can be housed in a bus, but what we learned since we last talked with you is that it can also be plugged into, for instance, we're putting one in the Seasons of Pendergrass, the HOA. So it can be plugged into a 120 volt outlet. So we've got 3 of those that Jackson EMC sponsored. That was around $2,600. And then we've got, as I mentioned, 27 of the MiFis, which part of that was district funded and part of that was Title I funded. And what we've done is, with our computer technicians, we had them call every family that indicated via the survey that they had a need, whether it was a device or whether it was connectivity or both. And then we've also collected their addresses, as well as the number of siblings they've had. We've used all that data to figure out where to place those Khajiit smart bus devices that have a broader, the thing about the Khajiits is they have a broader range, but they've got a limited amount of data. MiFis have a smaller range, but they have an unlimited amount of data. So it's been a beautiful partnership between transportation and technology to figure out how we can get everyone who has not been connected.
Great.
That's good. Now, one last question. I mentioned the jobless claims. I mean, kind of what we're seeing is rather sobering. People that were not eligible for free or reduced lunch at the beginning of the year, maybe before this year is over. So any child that needs a meal, or how can they go about making sure they can get a meal?
Dr. Blankenship, do you want me, you, or Ted to respond to that?
Well, I can respond to part of it, and maybe Ted wants to jump in, or you. We provided some information at the very beginning of meal distribution about the free and reduced lunch program, and have continued to provide information out there, direct people to the information to be able to apply online, and that it will actually carry them through the first few weeks of next year before they have to reapply. Okay. So Dr. Howard, Ted, you might want to share the plan going forward.
Right. So if you're not familiar with iServe Ministries, and Jeff Grant, he's partnered with us beautifully, and he's delivering bulk food to families. And anybody who calls that has a need, he and iServe Ministries are delivering bulk food. Yep. We are continuing with meals Monday and Thursday, and there is no vetting process. Anybody who comes and picks it up can have a meal. Doesn't matter whether you're free or reduced or not. And so if a kid shows up, we've identified the highest density areas that we know there's great need, and that's where our drop-off points are for the buses. And so anybody can come. I can tell you that today, Dr. Morris called, and she had, I don't have it in front of me, but over 800 meals were served today. and about 250, I believe, in the South Jackson area, 100 in the East Jackson area, about 200 in the Maysville area. And so the one thing that we want to look at is, quite frankly, the communities over in Brazelton and Houston are they're below 50% free and reduced lunch. So that area is challenged in terms of being served. But I think those guidelines are going to be lightened after spring break. And so we're looking at the possibility of trying to provide that. However, if somebody drives from Brazelton to any of those locations, they can pick it up. We just can't necessarily deliver right there, right now.
And Mr. Clarsey, I would add too that our social workers are working very closely. Social workers and counselors are working very closely with families to make sure that when needs are brought to them, that the families are getting the resources and the food that they need. And they're also following up with the families that we know are in the most need.
So in addition to the 800 meals that were served as meals today, our social workers coordinated an effort for the families that they know are the most needy. And in addition to iServe, they worked with Dr. Morris and they delivered 400 bags of food for over spring break. So they made 9 different volunteers loaded up over 400 bags and did personal deliveries to homes of places we knew kids were going to have struggle over spring break. So
the only other thing I would add to this, the information was great, just to say how proud we are of our people, whether it's school nutrition or transportation or social workers or other volunteers. People are jumping out into the front line to make sure this happens at a time when it's difficult to be on the front line. So really hats off to all of these folks doing that. Amazing.
absolutely.
I'm sure they're staying within the distance recommended to stay safe also.
Yes, they are.
And we provided them the PPE, the personal protective equipment, and we've provided them masks. And, they've not a single person has objected to what task has been asked of them. So, we are being more protective of them probably than they are, just because we do know that we have folks that are in that risk category, and we're trying to make sure that those folks do not participate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Dr. Blanket.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Blankenship, Human Resources and Enrollment Update.
Yes, so our enrollment really stayed virtually the same. We had an additional 5 students. And so that's there for your review. We didn't provide attendance reports this month for obvious reasons. So we're assuming everybody's attending school right now because they're doing it virtually.
Right.
So, and then I would just like to say, in addition to what Ted said, that we have just incredible staff members in all facets of our organization. Very, very humbling to see how everyone has pulled together and has worked together for our community and our kids. So I also want to thank you all again for supporting our principals in the needs that they presented and have as far as growth goes, because as you can see from the personnel list that we shared with you, they have done an incredible job of getting out there and securing some really, really great candidates. We're very excited about the candidates that have accepted offers with us. And so I would only tell you that there are 3 additions to the personnel list that you received. And that is 1 new hire, Akaya Rollo at North Jackson Elementary. We have 1 resignation, Dina Voiles. And then we have 1 new retirement, Joyce Hawkins. So those are the 3 additions to that list that you received.
Dr. Blankenship, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So attendance, is that gonna, and I hate to say, how are we keeping track of it, one, but also is it something that we have to keep track of?
So for student attendance,
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
referring to. So what we're doing is when teachers are obviously monitoring who comes into their virtual classroom each day, and they are following up with the students who don't check in or log on. They're also following up with students that don't complete work. And we're just going through a process like we normally would when a student is not present. We, obviously, if they can't make the contact, they then refer it to a counselor, then from counselor to social worker, and so on. And so right now, what we're really looking at is making sure that students complete their work and that they're engaging. And so, Dr. Howard, you may want to speak more on the attendance side of things.
And that's, I mean, is the state holding us super accountable for?
No.
Okay.
I think that's the
Everything
part.
has been waived.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's the part I should have probably shared with you is that so we are a strategic waiver school system. So back in 2015, we negotiated with the State Board of Education to have waivers on certain Title 20 code regulations. And so because we're in this contract, we have had those things waived. Now, because of this situation, there will be no CCRPI this year. So there'll be no accountability record at all. Attendance is to be handled by the district. And so whatever we report is what the state's going to take. And we are erring on the side of families. And so other than making sure children are safe and they're not being, neglected, but outside of that, we're erring on the side of families. And then we have all Title 20 regulations waived. And that was something the State Board and the Department of Education agreed to early on. So we are just absolutely focused on caring for the kids, providing them to as much engaging learning as we possibly can so that they're not sitting there with nothing to do. We're monitoring their growth, but we're not hyper focused on grades. We're more focused on keeping them engaged and hoping that they're learning and growing and that we can keep them, in some sort of experiences so that's healthy.
And if I could add to that, Dr. Howard, Mr. Hollett, we have not only our teachers that are monitoring that, excuse me, but if our teachers see that some of the students are not connected, they indicated about a week and a half ago whether or not they had the ability to connect online. So I kind of refer back to our conversation earlier. That's why we're trying to make sure that we can provide, whether it's a device or a wireless connectivity. But even in the cases where we can't make either of those happen, which is a diminishing number of students, we've got email, we've got text, we've got phone calls, and really truly what's happened is we've not only between our teachers, our computer technician support, and our social workers, what we're looking at is, as Dr. Blankenship mentioned, is attendance is more about the completion of work and personalizing it to make sure that we understand your circumstances are different than some other people's circumstances, not you specifically. I'm just saying in general. So that being the case, let's figure out what I've referred to as being a completion plan. Maybe your parents work all day and they're still going to a factory or warehouse or an office place, and you don't have internet connectivity. So the only time you can get online is between 4 and 6 when they drive you up to a school. Well, then what we're doing is we're making a personalized plan. So, we have generalized expectations, but one of our district goals has always been the personalization of learning. And this is a great opportunity for us to exercise that. So our teachers have been empowered to make sure that they understand that not every child has the ability to complete work at the same pace or access to connectivity.
That's good.
So
I know, and teachers, I appreciate what they've done, but it has changed a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And so it was almost threatened that some of these kids were going to have to go to summer school, elementary school, middle school kids. Is that something that's going to happen?
No, one of the things that we've talked about is that, and I'm going to be careful with my words since there are people watching this outside too, but
and that's fine. We can.
This is a unique circumstance, and we would never ever pursue punitive actions for a student who could not continue to learn at the same pace and the same rate because there was any kind of limited connectivity that we would.
That was my frustration, and I didn't want to bring it up really, but so it has. I've noticed the difference, not every one of my kids is connected at home, and it varies greatly per teacher, of course, but they're all doing a great job. And I appreciate the hard work, and
Yeah.
also, Mr. Nicholson, to give you some props. I feel like you have us set up very well for and have been moving us towards this unknowingly, maybe even, but we kind of stepped into it very nicely. So thank you for that.
It's a thank you. It's a testament to our teachers, our media specialists, our leaders. They've all done everything they can possibly do to attend to our students' needs. And we, because personalization, I'll reiterate that's one of our 5 strategic goals. And so you can't personalize in any better environment than this one.
True.
So
Yeah.
we've talked about extending grace and understanding and always erring on the side of our students.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Hollett, what a lot of our schools have done is assigned some of the support staff to groups of students to check in with too, so that we want to make sure that our students still feel connected to school and to their classroom and to their teachers, and so that's another piece that's helping the teachers out too, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So the only other topic there under leadership and performance is secondary planning update. And there's nothing to present other than to let you know that we are working very closely with the high schools, because one of the things that we had planned and still plan is to transition to the modified AB block. And so we did not want to put out communications in the midst of all of the COVID-19 things that are going on. So starting after spring break, we will begin now that folks are kind of adjusted to the new normal that we're going to be living in. One of the things our high schools are strongly considering and likely to do is to begin the AB schedule in a digital form starting after spring break. And we feel like this would be a great opportunity for them to test drive it and to also, quite frankly, make it a little bit more manageable. Kids having 7 classes a day in a digital format is very taxing both for the teacher and for the student. And so approaching the AB schedule modified block as a test drive for the last 6 weeks is a consideration that they're taking very strongly. So just know that we're still leaning that way. We'll begin pushing out additional information to our parents after spring break, and our students are going to have even class days on one day, and then the next day they'll have odd, or vice versa. And it may make the manageability of the workload for both a little bit easier. So I think that's a great plan. And again, that's work that Mr. Nicholson's team help support with that group. So that's all the updates we have for the work session. And then we have the board meeting in a separate, we can stay on the same meeting format, but unless you have questions, Ms. Wheeler, we can adjourn the work session and reconvene in the board meeting.
Howard, just one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
Facility rental, did you want to mention anything about that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have it written here. Just as a courtesy, I'd like to ask the board's permission to negotiate on your behalf that we renegotiate some of our facilities use agreements and to extend some grace to folks who are small business owners. And the 3 primary that I'd like your blessing to be able to work with. As you know, the Matt Rupel, who owns the bakery and is running that out of West Jackson Primary School, he's paying a pretty substantial lease payment to us. His goal is to keep his people employed. Not only does he pay the lease payment, he also pays the utilities. And we would like to extend a 60 to 90 day grace period for him, that he not have to pay rent, but he maintain the utilities and keep those folks employed. And then we'll resume that. The second one that I'd like for you to consider is Northeast Church, who uses West Primary simply for storage. They've reduced the amount of storage that they're using, and we'd like to equally extend some grace to them in terms of paying rent for that. And then the last one that would be a contractual agreement, but Southside Church is doing a lot for our community to help with iServe and all of the things that are going on. We would like to renegotiate with them and do an amendment to that contract and to allow them, and this would be contractual because we have an existing lease purchase agreement, but to allow me to negotiate through Corey Kirby the potential of a 3 to 6 month extension on their lease as well.
Okay.
So I'd like to have your approval to move forward with those, and then I'll bring it back to you to make sure that you're informed of how we're negotiating that.
So we don't need to actually vote on that tonight, just give our verbal approval of that with you right now?
If you can give me your verbal approval to renegotiate, I think that will be fine. And then I'll bring the actual negotiated contracts back to you in May.
Okay, I'm in favor of us moving forward with that. How about the rest of you folks?
I'm just curious.
Yes.
So what, can you tell me again? So just extending their contracts or foregoing payments? What?
So they're each a little bit different because Matt Rupel has a lease agreement, and we'd like for him to pay the utilities, but give him, and quite frankly, I think there's several places in Brazelton that this same thing is happening, that they're waiving their lease and asking them to try to keep their folks employed. So
Okay.
we don't lose money per se. We do. Certainly he's not paying his lease, but that's not money that we're dependent on in our general operating fund.
I'd also mention that when Mr. Rupel under the lease, he pays the utilities for the entire building, not just the space that he uses.
Right.
And it's pretty significant.
Yes, it is. Much more than you would think.
Okay, I'm sorry. So waiving that for 3 months? So
That was our recommendation. That's what we'd like to bring to you as a consideration.
yes. And then I understood the Northeast Georgia Church, but then Southside, you wanted to do what now?
Southside would be a little bit different because they're actually a lease purchase. So they would still end up paying. We would just allow them to extend for 3 to 6 months the payment, because they have a balloon payment in December of 21, as you know. So we could do one of two things. They could make up the 3 months that they're not able to pay, or we could extend and we'll go through Corey either way, because it will have to be a lease agreement amendment. But I'd like to at least allow them that grace period during this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and that's due largely to the fact that they are assisting and helping to feed our children so much, correct?
Right. And all nonprofits and churches are being significantly impacted by this as well. And as you all know, Southside has invested a lot, and that school looks like a new place. And I just think that that's the right thing to do, is to allow them time to recoup from this impact and to renegotiate that. We'll be fair, but we're not going to give anything, but I think it's important to treat them as we would want to be treated and allow them to navigate through this right now.
April, let me ask, you mentioned Northeast Church and the storage. So I don't think they've been having Sunday service. So if they don't use the middle school, they don't pay. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's nothing to waive there if they don't use it.
They're not using it, so they're not paying.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm with Lynn. I'm good.
I'm fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good with it too.
Okay. Thank you. I'll work with the ones that need a contractual agreement, like Southside. I'll work with them and bring something to you, and then we'll let you know exactly what we work out with the others. But right now, if I can just have your blessing to negotiate at least a 3 month with Matt Rupel, that would be greatly appreciated. So, okay, Ms. Wheeler, that's all we have, and thank you, Ed, for bringing that forth. And I will turn it back to you.
All right. Well, we will now call to order our board meeting, and hopefully everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting already. And so we will need an approval of the minutes. So do I have a motion that we approve our minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. And the approval of the agenda. Now, do we need to add anything other than just the 3 items that I have on. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, well, let's see. No, it's just the 3. Okay. I had printed me off one too.
Mhm.
Is there anything else we need to change with the agenda, April?
No, ma'am. The only thing, Dr.
Of our agenda, please. I
So
need a
moved.
motion. Okay, and a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, very good. All right, Dr. Howard, do you have any other comments that you'd like to make at this time?
No, I think we've discussed a lot. I just want to say thank you to the board. It's been, I feel like I've neglected you a little bit because we've been very focused on the work, but I want you to know how much our entire team appreciates what a productive retreat we had. And while the next day things changed because of the budget, we'll keep working hard. I think it is worth saying that Anna and all of us have been working closely. As Mr. Clarsey already noted, we're going to be in a unique situation in terms of crafting a preliminary budget, but you've seen what our goals are, and we commit to making sure that we keep up to date as much as we can. But outside of that, I'm grateful for this school system. We got wonderful people who are really committed to making sure our kids are taken care of, and that's all we care about.
We do. I'll have to say this before we have our actual vote. I've talked to a number of folks throughout the state that are also in education, and they've been blown away when I have told them how we have been able to handle this situation. I feel very, very blessed that we're in the situation that we're in, and that all that's being done for our students. So I just really appreciate everything, and I know, and the entire board we're real grateful for this.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. And does anybody else have any other comments they'd like to make before we vote?
One last question on the calendar.
Yes, sir.
That calendar was recommended by the parent advisory group. Did I hear that right?
Yes. Well, it was before the parent advisory asked us to start having more than a 1 year at a time. And so this is the calendar we shared with them. And then when we shared it and they liked it, then when we shared it with teachers, there was a little bit of a red flag because of that 6-day pre-planning. But once we went back to them and had the teacher advisory council and explained it, they were completely in favor of it. So yes, sir, it comes from both of those committees, and it's
okay.
I see one little error we'll fix. It says 2011 through 21, but it's 21-22. So we'll make that correction. You see that error?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll fix that. So
okay. All right. All right. Well, if we have no other comments, then using the consent agenda, do I have a motion that we approve items 1 through 3?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, in a second. I think we had
Second.
Okay, very good. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, very good. Well, thank you. I'm still blown away with how we can do all this, but I'm very grateful at the same time. And I have been very glad to know that you folks in the central office are staying at home and doing your work from home and not getting in too close quarters with everybody. So we want everybody to continue to be diligent and staying safe, and everybody stay well, and so we can all be back together one of these days before too long. So, all right. Do I have a motion that we adjourn?
So move.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, thanks again, and y'all have a nice evening, the rest of it, and continue to pray for the Lord to continue to watch over and take care of us and carry us through this, and I'm sure He will. So
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Y'all try to get some rest too. Everybody try to get a little rest.
Thank you. We appreciate you all very much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.